what will it cost the Vancouver Canucks to trade for a top 4 defenseman? I wrote about this over at Canucks Army, and I'm excited to publish it. I'm working on it right now, but this idea came to me. Shout out to @VCanucksNews on Twitter, Canucks News Summary. I'm sure you've seen the account. Does all the
awesome
cat
stuff.
math. Great account. He put this list together of the last trades for top 4 defensemen around the National Hockey League that have happened since Patrick Allvin has come in as Canucks general manager. So he's basically put down all the costs, how they differ with RFAs, how they differ with rentals, and then players under contract. And he's kind of put it all together, and it's helping me kind of figure out exactly what it's going to cost. And maybe not exactly, but giving you a nice ballpark of what it's actually going to cost to go out and get some of these players. There's 3 that I want to talk about. Rasmus Andersson, bear with me, Marcus Pettersson, and then I also want to talk about Cam Fowler, but Cam Fowler we'll talk about at the end, okay? Let's start with Rasmus Andersson, who I think when you look at this list, the biggest comparable, at least in my mind right now, is that you're looking at something like a Filip Hronek or Jacob Chychrun return in terms of this is a younger guy. He's under contract. I think a lot of people forget this about Rasmus Andersson. He's at $4.5 million for this year, but also next year. Right? Like, that's a super valuable piece for any contending team to add to their team. So undoubtedly, he's going to be the top target. It starts, in my mind, given what the Canucks paid for Hronek, given what the price was for Jacob Chychrun, it starts at a 1st and 2nd round pick, in my mind. Starts at. Do you agree?
Yeah, that's a fair assessment, and we'll see, right? Calgary doesn't have to move off from Anderson the way that... I think that originally it was Arizona that sold Chychrun to Ottawa at the time. Chychrun wanted out, and the Coyotes were rebuilding at the time.
And they still got a 1st and 2 seconds for him.
Yeah, and now the Flames probably have a little bit more leverage where
they could also just keep him for next deadline. They can just keep him till next deadline. He'll get a similar package. Like maybe you lose
the additional 2nd round
pick.
Maybe
you lose the additional 2nd round pick, or the 2nd round pick becomes a 3rd instead next deadline. Maybe. And that's all you're looking at. Because again, it shifts from being in the under contract category up to rental category. So that's obviously a little bit different. But I think right now, if Rasmus Andersson gets traded at the deadline, it starts at a 1st and 2nd. Now, the question for Canucks fans is, are you comfortable paying that? And I think that's where you start to have the questions. I just think it's too early to say. As much as I like to say, time to go get Rasmus Andersson, I think it's too early to say. Really what it depends on is where the Canucks are December, where they are January. Again, Elias Pettersson looks like he's starting to get back, but if Elias Pettersson's not at that game-breaking level back to who he is, you don't really want to go all in on improving this team, at least in my view. So that's what I think about Rasmus Andersson. Moving down the list, Marcus Pettersson, a guy you really like. Set to become an unrestricted free agent at the end of the season. 28 years old, he firmly falls into the rental category. We obviously saw Chris Tanev last year go for not very much. Like I think it kind of surprised people that's what Chris Tanev ended up going for. We've heard reports, Rick Dollywell of Donnie and Dolly, the team, on Czech TV. He's been talking about a high market, a high price, asking price from the Penguins for Marcus Pettersson. I think the Canucks, as much as they like to strike early and as much as they like their former Penguins, I think the Canucks are probably just going to wait this one out a bit. And I think if that's their target, they're going to be looking at it and trying to get him for a price more similar to what Chris Tanev went for.
Yeah, and it also depends on what exactly the Penguins are looking for, because there have been reports out there that Kyle Dubas isn't necessarily prioritizing picks first, that it's young players, prospects that are already in the system. So that's another thing to keep in mind too is, comparables. I love building comparables off like picks and prospects because it's easier to sort of like apples to apples compare, just like picks, right? As compared to younger players. But in this case, that is something to note. Is we'll see if Pittsburgh ultimately wants picks or if they're targeting more prospects and younger players. Secondly, it is going to be an interesting game of chicken when it comes to this D market, because if you go back to last year, the Penguins had a high asking price on Jake Guentzel for a long time. And you look at how that trade ultimately played out. The Canes waited it out, and ultimately they got him in a package where they didn't even have to give up a first-round pick. They gave up a conditional second and 3 like middle-of-the-road prospects. Like nothing special. That was a pretty underwhelming package. Michael Bunting was also part of the trade, but he's been really disappointing in considering his contract. I don't even know if he's a positive value asset at this juncture. But the point being, it's going to be difficult and interesting to see how this management group finds the balance between, that prices are usually set high early on and that they have the potential to go down, but given the lack of high-quality top-4 defensemen that are likely to be available at the deadline this year, and given how many contenders are looking for top-4 help, you don't want to fall into the trap of waiting too long, another team steps up to the plate, and all of a sudden in this game of musical chairs, you're left without a legit top-4 defenseman that you want to go after.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we're talking about these rental prices. It's good. It fluctuates. That's the big thing you see when you look at this list is they fluctuate and they change based on a lot of different factors. An interesting name for me, Harm. Want to talk about him quickly? Cam Fowler. Okay, 2 years at $6.5 million, and this year and next year signed through it. I think the only way that Cam Fowler is like a positive asset is if the Ducks are retaining, which you have to think they would be willing to do that. We haven't heard reports that they are, I don't think. So we will see if they're willing to retain. If they're willing to retain, there are still question marks that the 32-year-old defenseman is a little bit washed, right? Because we've seen him get passed over in Anaheim. We've seen him basically be a third-pairing guy in Anaheim. Now, do you think Cam Fowler's bad on-ice results and underlying numbers are a result of playing in Anaheim, or do you think it's just him taking a step back? And I'm not asking you to answer the question because I think the answer is we don't know. There's no real way to know, and any team that makes that trade is taking on that risk and making a bet on Cam Fowler bouncing back and being the guy that we've seen him be in the past. Like, he's been a good top-pairing guy in the past. Can he still do that at 32? Right now, the results are saying no, and hell, let's be honest, the Ducks haven't been good for a long time now. So, again, I don't think you're willing to take that kind of swing, but, again, retention, right? The cap hit comes down. Do you think about it then at all? Because to me, like, that's the only time I'd start to think about it, is you're retaining, the cap hit comes down to, what would it be, 3.75 half, right?
Something like that, yeah.
3.75 would be the cap hit, and you're hoping that he can take a step up. That's risky for the Canucks specifically, because if all he is a third-pairing guy, the Canucks have more than enough third-pairing guys. So that's a risky one. But again, when it comes to acquisition cost, what's it going to cost? You're taking a high upswing bet. You're probably not going to have to give up much more than what you traded for Nikita Zadorov, who, again, at the time, the reason he's not included on this list is because when Nikita Zadorov was traded for, he was a pretty bona fide third-pairing guy, and they had to give up a third and a fifth-round pick in that trade, obviously.
Yeah, Fowler, like you said, the only way I'd even consider the idea is with significant retention, and you'd need to do a big deep dive because, like you said, I don't know by myself. I've watched the Ducks, I've watched Fowler here and there, but I haven't done an exhaustive deep dive to come to a conclusion on which side I think is more likely, as far as, is he just rapidly declining, or is there a chance that he could rehab his value and bounce back as a legit top four contributor when he's playing fewer minutes, when he's on a more insulated, higher quality team.
All right. Make sure you like, subscribe, hit all those buttons on the YouTube.